Hi, hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of East India Marketing Company. I think today I'm so pleased to have someone who sort of typifies East India in a lot of ways. While I think he has stayed away from East India for so long, but I think carries East India on his sleeve, in his heart, in his works, both professionally and otherwise. And we'll talk about all of that. Welcome, Arnab Ray,
Thank you.
GreatBong's.
Thank you for having me on East India Company.
Yep, absolutely. I think in lieu of Onobda's intro, I want to share something that he feels like he's just a representation of one of us out there talking about everything pop culture, everything B grade Bollywood to cricket to politics to why is Abraham Khan dancing there as part of the Rubai Ambani Schools Fest. So I think it's always like he's there even before like we want to share our view on something, he's there with that view out there. He feels like that person, and not just that's like for the last couple of years. He has been there from the days of Facebook to Meta to now Twitter, and from the days of blogs actually.
Orkut.
Or Orkut actually, yeah, that's the OG social media, so to say. But all of the to start off with on a somber note, I wanted to share this melancholy with you. We are about to celebrate 1 month of the National Mourning Day on 19th of November. That happened. Have you recovered for the World Cup final yet?
To the extent that I don't want to see another one-day international, I'm absolutely least interested in the India-South Africa series. If it's a test match, I'm perfectly fine seeing it. But I don't think that I will want to see a one-day international for at least one more year. It will take me one more year to even take this format seriously. Because I haven't recovered from the shock of
Yeah.
of what happened.
Yeah. And personally, I was there in the stadium. One of those unfortunate who traveled there for, after paying. I don't want to recall the number again, but yeah, and it was terrible. It was like inviting depression. Like it's like 2003, 96, 2007 all over again. But then all of it combined because I invited that
The
depression.
depression actually is because it is one of the few finals that we
Yeah,
went in as
we
not as the
went in
underdog,
as yeah,
right? So we
yeah,
were
yeah,
expecting
yeah,
to win. In
yeah.
2003, we were still the underdogs. The Australians
Correct,
were a far superior team, and they had steamrolled us in the prelim match that we had played.
correct,
We were not
correct.
competing there.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
wasn't even expecting for us to even compete in
yeah.
South Africa against that Australian attack. This
Hmm,
time it was different. We went
hmm,
in as the overwhelming favorites. It was
hmm,
our ground. I thought that everything has been set up,
hmm.
uh, everything has been planned, but then, of course, they over planned it, as I had
Yeah,
written in my blog post,
yeah.
and I think what I said then, it was a controversial opinion because people
Hmm.
were blaming the batsman, but I'd said the problem was the pitch. And
It
now
was.
I think all of them have come to the conclusion that yes, the pitch was the problem. It was exactly the kind of pitch that India were not good on,
Yeah.
and they prepared a pitch like that.
So, how did all it start for you? Like after JU, we went to Stony Brook. So, when did you start writing or think about writing?
So the first time, well, I've always been writing. I mean, the first time I got an award, or let's say I had a return on investment for my
Hmm,
writing,
hmm,
was when I was in Jadavpur University first year. There was a competition going on with in Telegraph, which
hmm.
was readers' writing. It was an open competition, and so
Right.
they had three of these editions. So the
Hmm,
first edition was forgotten. The first edition was at that point of time there was this thing which again many of your listeners or viewers might not get this, but there was this craze across India that Ganesha was drinking milk.
Oh
This
yeah.
was
Yes. Yeah.
so
Capillary
they
action. Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
so they asked for an article on what do you think happened, and I
Hmm,
wrote an imaginary conversation in a style
hmm.
that I would later on use many times
Yeah.
in my blog, which was an
Yeah.
imaginary conversation between me and somebody called the Big G.
Okay.
And the Big G is basically explaining, and at the end the Big
Hmm,
G says that if I asked you to how many holes do you have on your belt, you
huh.
won't be able to tell me without looking, right? Even though you wear it every day. So this
Yeah.
is something like that, right?
Hmm,
It happens every day. It's only when you notice that you see that it
hmm,
is something which you can't explain. So I wrote that, and
hmm.
then the next competition I didn't write. Then after that there was another competition that I think Christopher Hitchens wrote a book on Mother Teresa, where
Yeah.
it was a
Yeah.
very
Those are
controversial
familiar.
book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there they asked us to comment on it,
Hmm,
and as all of us know, Mother Teresa was like God in Calcutta in those days. So I wrote and I won second prize in both of these competitions. And
Hmm.
the prize was insane for those days. So I
Yeah.
got 4 round trip air tickets to Jaipur
Okay.
on
Wow.
on
Oh, for lit.
Damania Airways.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
That was huge. I mean, air travel was
Yeah.
quite costly in those days.
Yeah.
And that too to Jaipur, from Kolkata to Jaipur. So I took
Yeah.
my parents along with me. So I was able to pay for at least the airfare
Hmm.
for our trip to Jaipur. And the
Hmm.
only time that I started considering it to be something that I can make even a little bit of money from was
Hmm.
when I was first approached in around 2008 by HarperCollins to
Yeah.
write a biography of Mithun Chakravarti.
Okay. Okay. By that time,
So,
your blog was running full time
yes,
and
my
GreatBong
blog
had
had
been.
been running for 4 years. One of the most popular posts was a
Yeah.
post on Mithun Chakravarti. So, they
Right.
wanted me to write a biography on Mithun Chakravarti, which, in their opinion, was basically going to be an extension of that post on Mithun Chakravarti.
Okay.
But I told them that no, of course, first of all, if you want to write a biography on a serious person, if you're calling it a biography, it can't be an extension of a sarcastic article. You have to, until and unless you respect the subject matter, you should
Right.
not write a biography on that person. So that's the
Hmm.
first thing. Second is, so the tone cannot be that. It has to be, I mean, it's a very fascinating, Mithun Chakravarti is an extremely fascinating person to
Yeah.
write on
Yeah.
because nobody has written a biography on Mithun Chakravarti because Mithun
Yeah. Now that
Chakravarti.
you tell me, I'm just thinking, no, that's not been written
Yes.
yet. Wow.
So he was insanely popular in Russia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I'd said that if you seriously want somebody, and I can't do it because I have a job, is that
Hmm.
you need to pay for the guy to go to Russia and
Hmm.
interview.
Hmm.
Basically go to the places where he went and interview the Russian people in the Russian. And in those days, again,
Correct.
it was not that easy to find people on social media. Maybe nowadays
Correct.
you don't need to, but in
Hmm.
those days, he absolutely needed to go there. So he had 3 phases in his life that I wanted to cover in that book.
Hmm. Hmm.
One was his, so 4 phases actually. One was his Naxal phase in
Hmm.
Kolkata.
Hmm.
So that was
Hmm.
one phase of his life.
Yeah.
Then
Scottish
his,
Church College. Yeah.
yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and I actually knew a few people in Kolkata who
Hmm.
knew him from
Hmm.
his Naxal days when he was in North Calcutta, used to swim at Hendo. So
Hmm.
then it would move to Bombay, where
Hmm.
he was a dancing star. He couldn't get roles because he could only dance. So it
Yeah.
would be that part where he struggles and becomes kind of the number one after Amitabh Bachchan leaves.
Hmm.
Then as part of that, there would be disco dancer, and that would be Russia. Then there
Hmm.
would be the phase of his life where he moves to Uti and
Hmm.
starts making that kind of like mass
Hmm.
produced movies where there would be one movie coming out every Friday, and
Correct.
nobody watched it except there was like it was a very targeted effort. I mean, even
Yeah.
as a marketing exercise, I think there's a lot
Hmm.
to be said there because they
Yeah. Yeah.
basically reused the same sets and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I had to cover all of these three, and
Hmm.
HarperCollins was not interested in the investment that it sounded.
Hmm.
It was a big investment. So then they
Hmm.
basically said, okay, write a book based on your blog.
Hmm.
So I took, for my first book, I took about 50% of what I'd already written. And why did
Yeah.
I take 50% of what I'd already written? Why didn't I write a totally new book? And the reason why I did that, and perhaps that's where the marketing lesson is
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I was coming into the market as a new name. Like nobody knew
Hmm.
me at that point of time. And the reason why you wrote, and this kind of thinking has changed over the years. But in those days, people who read, so first of all, internet connectivity was extremely expensive.
You're right.
So when you went online, it's not
Hmm.
like free nowadays as it is
Hmm.
essentially.
Hmm. Hmm.
So people spent very little time online, and when they
Hmm.
spent time online,
Hmm.
reading blogs was there was only the people who prioritized reading blogs were people who basically had a free internet connection.
Correct.
There
Yeah.
were people either who were surfing it from their work because I could
Hmm.
track their IP addresses. I could see the companies they were coming from. And
Yeah.
they were either in US, they were graduate students. So
This is
internet was,
amazing big data analysis. Yeah.
yes.
Of your
Yes.
readership.
So there was an IP tracker. I could see where people
Yeah.
were coming from. So
Hmm.
no, very few people were like from dial-up lines at home, like VSNL. You got very few hits.
For this, just pause on of the for the
Yes,
uninitiated on of the just IP etc. In case
yes.
some of our viewers are hearing you for the first time, can you just share why back in early 2010s you are using terms like IP etc. to track your readers
Yes.
so
So
that
IP
you
addresses are basically unique addresses on the internet.
why you are able to share that? What do you do in your day job? If you want to share that as well,
Oh, so
I didn't.
so for those of you, yeah. So I'm a computer science PhD. I did my undergraduate in computer science and engineering from Jadavpur University, and then I went to Stony Brook to do my PhD in computer science. And now I'm a director of cybersecurity. My specialization is medical device or healthcare
Hmm,
cybersecurity.
hmm,
So tracking people was something which I always
yeah,
liked to do because I
yeah,
wanted to see where people were coming from. I actually even sometimes knew who was visiting it
you're right.
because they used to have the names of the person as the
Okay,
host name, so I could
okay,
see their names. Reason why I wrote this book was, first of all, I wanted to increase my market to people who just didn't know who I was because they just didn't go to the net to read stuff, right?
oh
So
no,
there
this is
was
amazing. I'm just thinking of possibility. Sorry to cut you.
yeah,
Like, imagine if you knew the person and using a lookalike audience, you could drive like 70 paisa performance ads later on that you have liked this book. You can probably read Yatrik now or Shakchunni. Anyway, please go on. Yeah,
yes. So see that I'll come to that. Maybe we'll revisit that. That's really one
yeah,
of the reasons why you want to get published and you don't want to self-publish.
yeah, yeah.
So if you want to get into the commercial aspects of publishing, but the reason why I did that was I wanted to increase my audience to
Hmm,
people who don't read content online. So
hmm,
um, so 50% of my book was stuff that you read online, but my main thesis was that most people hadn't read it. So
hmm.
it was something which I knew had been vetted in those days. So
Right,
they were essentially viral content already. So I knew
correct.
that for a new person, even if they
Hmm,
didn't like 50% of the new material and none of it worked,
hmm.
50% of it would still hit.
Got it.
So that
Hmm,
was one thing.
hmm,
Second thing that I did was that my first book, which is called May I Have Your Attention Please, which is what I
hmm,
produced for HarperCollins instead of the Mithun biography,
hmm,
had every chapter was written in a different kind of comedic style.
hmm,
So
hmm. Okay,
one chapter was like a fake diary. One
got it.
chapter was like you would do stand up. One
Hmm,
chapter was a totally mock story. It was a story based on, and that was the first time actually I got a movie offer.
hmm.
So based on one chapter, somebody who was a fairly big guy in those days approached
Okay.
me, and then he said we couldn't go on with it because it was too controversial. There was a story there which was essentially, and that was because it was a spoof based on 2611. The
Hmm.
main thesis was
Oh,
that the guy who came last in the Lashkar-e-Toiba training camp comes
okay.
to Kolkata. Um, yeah, so the first guy goes to Bombay, the last guy is sent to Kolkata, where he comes in and goes and does the same thing to Great Eastern, basically something which is, and finds
Right.
there's nobody there except
Hmm.
the union guys sitting. And then and then later on, everybody's trying to get him to stay, and he's desperately trying to go away because as he
Hmm.
realizes that the people there have done worse than I can ever do. Um, so that was written in terms of a
Hmm.
fake
Hmm.
story.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was the first time actually somebody approached me to make a movie out of that. I felt it
Okay.
was a rather thin premise to make a movie. It was
Hmm.
more like a Saturday Night Live skit, but it was
Yeah.
but the inspiration was Saturday Night Live and a skit like that. So
I think BJP should pick up that story for their next Bengal election campaign. Anyway, please. On.
so that was the reason. That was the way it was produced like that. It was a fairly unique product, I would say,
Hmm.
because
Got it.
I don't think there have been
Interesting.
many such anthology comedy kind of books written
Yeah.
where there's
Yeah.
not one single story. It's
Yeah.
half fiction, half non-fiction.
Correct.
And it was till now,
Hmm.
it is my biggest selling book by far.
Wow. Well, like how
And
much? Like, put some percentages. All the other four and this.
so if I would say again, maybe if I add the summation of all the,
No
leave
way.
aside mine, other than mine, if I add the total sales of everything, it
Huh.
wouldn't reach how many
Wow.
copies me
Okay.
have
Still,
sold.
huh? Hmm. Okay.
So the reason, there were many reasons, and we can go into it why
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
cannot
Hmm.
replicate that kind of sales today at all. I mean, it doesn't matter what book you produce.
Right.
But in those days, the thing was, it was a fairly unique book.
Hmm.
But unfortunately, if somebody asked me today to rank all my books, I would put it last.
Wow.
because
Yeah.
I don't think
Nice.
it's a particularly
That's
well
what.
written book. And
Yeah.
if I was writing it today, I wouldn't write it like that. But of course, it was a
Got it.
different me who wrote it. So I also
Hmm.
feel that I sometimes forget that I was a different person there. But
Yeah.
yeah, of all the books, I would say it's my weakest. But in terms of sales, it is by far the strongest.
Correct, correct. But fascinating. I think two, three takeaways, and I like to do summaries, pieces, the responses. I think one, knowing your audience so nicely. I don't know whether all authors do that as well, but I think it's because of the balance of logic and magic that someone like you are. You could do that naturally, and I think that went in the design of the book itself. Second, I think, is it probably fair to say that you put in a lot more of who you are in this book probably at that point, and then increasingly you sort of stretched your boundaries and tried more experiments in the other ones that you wrote,
Right. So
right?
you start off your product with something that you're extremely confident in.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
first of all, there was pre-vetted content, and
Correct.
second is so much of it was myself, as you rightfully
Yeah,
say, that
yeah,
I knew that I would come out as authentic because I'm not. This
yeah.
is not imagination.
Correct.
Most of it, even the ones that are written as fiction, are basically true stories. If
Yeah,
you read through, you'll understand.
yeah.
So I started off with something that I was very comfortable.
One of the, just zooming out a little bit, like let's say the listeners who are slightly younger here, or the viewers, they want to know about the ecosystem, right? Who are the stakeholders? I mean, I can think of obviously the authors and the readers and the publishers. Is there anything else, or is this the exhaustive ecosystem?
The publisher consists of a creative core, which
Mm-hmm.
is the people who read your book
Mm-hmm.
and decide if it meets the merit, the literary merit of what they want to publish. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why this is important,
Yeah,
especially if you are publishing with a Penguin or a HarperCollins or a Hachette, is
yeah.
that they are international publishing houses. So if they
Right.
publish anything, like if
Hmm.
they just publish anything, then their
Hmm.
risk is that their established authors are going to say that we
Hmm.
don't want to work with you. Because
Mhm.
ultimately, the main value that a publishing house provides you is its brand. That's
Right.
it. So when you pick
And
up,
distribution, no? And brand and distribution.
no, not even distribution.
No?
There are so
Help,
you
help, help us understand why. Help us understand why.
yes. So it's not as if the big publishing houses have the best distribution. As a matter
Okay.
of fact, the tier B publishers have the
No
better
way.
distribution.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yes.
Wow.
So the tier B publishers,
Name some tier B publishers, please, for our understanding so
Rupa,
that we
for
have
instance.
context.
So
Okay.
when I say tier B, I mean I don't mean it as a pejorative or anything. I'm
Got
just
it.
saying that
Got it.
in terms of Rupa is an exclusively Indian publisher, right?
Fair. Yeah.
Penguin, Random House, these are
They're
international
so-called.
publishers who are known across the world. I mean, they publish Harry Potter and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Hatchet and all.
even
Yeah.
King Harry Potter. So when I'm
Hmm.
saying A, I mean an
Hmm.
international presence with that. So they
Got it.
actually in India, they never had that level of distribution that a Rupa, for instance, has.
Got it.
Because Rupa is it's always been driven by commerce. And so I'm coming to the other
Yes.
stakeholders. So the big stakeholder is the distributor and the bookstores.
Right.
So it used to be that the bookstores used to be very important. Over the years, people are increasingly buy online. So bookstores, I mean, if you go to any bookstore, you'll find that the bookstore has only 40% books and 60% cards and toys and other stuff.
Correct. Arijit Singh.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so bookstores are increasingly becoming less important. But when I started off, bookstores were very important. And they're still important to an extent for discovery.
Right.
We can
Correct.
talk
Correct.
about that if you want.
By the way, one of the in my last episode, I was talking to the guy who heads marketing for Jordan within Nike in Oregon. He was mentioning that that's the case in retail also. Like the stores, the physical stores have actually become the basically the top of the funnel awareness driver outlets, the touch points. The actual commerce, like 50-60% of it actually comes from .coms, the Snickers, Nike, etc. So it's very interesting. I'm just drawing parallels between something like publishing and this. Please continue. Yeah.
Yes. So even in a publishing, there are the editors who are
Mhm.
usually English
Mm,
lit
mm,
students.
mm,
Then there is commercial,
mm.
which consists of basically the CEO. So the CEO is basically concerned about the business,
Correct.
while the chief editor is concerned about the literary merit of what you're
Right.
publishing. So it's often and the whole Chetan Bhagat thing is basically a fight between two sides of the house. So the
Mm,
literary guys are saying no, and the commercial guys are saying yes.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Editorial and business for like practical.
editorial and business,
Hmm.
and then the business is there is a marketing team. And marketing is fairly weak in Indian publishers. All
Correct.
publishers, even international publishers,
It's a
the market.
support function for all practical
Yes.
purposes. Yeah.
So, but sales, distribution, and so
Hmm.
distribution, there are multiple. So sometimes the publishers have their own exclusive distribution, and
Hmm.
increasingly over the years, there's a totally different distribution channel, and all
Hmm.
publishers use those distribution companies. Some of these
Okay.
distribution companies themselves open publishing houses. So
Nice. Yeah.
it goes now the other way, and many of them have done, and the reason is, I'm kind of getting ahead of the story, is that the big publishing houses, the
Hmm.
Hachette's and the Harper Collinses, their main problem often is that they can't get books to the storefronts at the right point of time. They are not as agile as some of the tier B publishing houses. So I
Got it.
remember, I mean, they basically go around bookstores. So it used to, when bookstores were a thing, like medical representatives, they would carry a
Wow.
jhula with them
It's
with
happened.
books, and they would
Yeah.
like basically force it on you. So they
Hmm.
would go like, no, no, you have to buy 5 of these. No,
Yeah.
this book is not working. Okay, no, but I'll give you 2 of these books. But if you want 10 of these books, you have to take 2 of those books. So they
Got
would
it.
drive these bargains.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
larger publishing houses nowadays, they have changed too, because they
Mhm.
basically outsource the distribution to these guys.
Yeah.
They had some attitude basically. So
Hmm.
so they were like, I'm Penguin. I mean, if I give something to you, I'm giving you a Penguin product. So I
Yeah.
think that command has gone out of the business because it's shrunk. It's literally shrunk.
Got it.
But when I started in 2008 or 10,
Mhm.
publishing was so much fun, because I'll give you an example. When I
Hmm.
went to India for MIHYAP, my editor took me out to this really posh restaurant, and like it was
Hmm.
like drinks and everything. He plied me with it. And
Yeah, like
so
I've
yeah,
arrived.
yes. So and then there used to be like multi-city tours where
Yeah.
they would pay for you to go to these different cities. They would have events they would pay for.
Hmm.
This was when I was starting out.
Yeah.
Now I've been writing books, and there is nothing, zilch, zero.
Now you're in multi-podcast, Arnab. You're with us.
Yes, this is the
Like,
podcast, but there's everything. There's no daru at all anywhere. There is not even a drop.
I can offer you virtual coffee if that is. Yeah, please.
So there is not.
Yeah.
So that's the unfortunate part of it, because I mean, people might say lit fests, but I'll be very honest with you. There is no sales from lit fest. I was at Kolkata Lit Fest, and there was this one store which was selling, like, had 2 of my books, just two copies
Okay.
of my book,
Okay.
and they couldn't sell it. There was not one person who bought even one book. So in terms of the only reason why you go to Lit Fest is for your own ego. That's the only reason. But in a market for sales, it has zero impact. Zero.
Yeah. No, I understand. I mean, a couple of friends of mine have recently written a book on cricket trivia, and they were at this Bangalore Lit Fest, and they were signing their books for some of those 8-year-old kids who would never go beyond whatever. And then suddenly they turn around, they see Mike Brearley, like Mike Brearley signing books, but nobody knows him. Like
They wouldn't know who Mike Brearley is. I
They
think.
wouldn't know. But help us with the commercials, right? I wanted to know a little bit about, let's say, the percentages. So, what is the typical average, author who wants to start out, advance and let's say sales percentages that he or she is looking at today,
So
and also the evolution? How has it changed?
sure. So a normally a author makes from 7% to 10% per MSRP for a book.
Okay. What is
So,
MSRP? Maximum sales price.
maximum retail price.
Okay.
So straight off the bat, you write the book, and the best deal you can get is 90% of your sales of the revenue goes to somebody else.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So you can immediately see where the problem is with traditional publishing. So, and this is the best terms you can get. It's usually 7% to 10%. So there is an advance which is usually given. An advance is called an advance against sales. So you get an advance, and that is yours to keep, no matter, even if your book doesn't sell a single copy. But remember, that is advance against sales. It's not that the first book you get paid. Because you've taken the advance, it is just an advance against sales. And then once your book sales cross that advance against sales, then you start getting paid again.
Okay. Okay.
Initially, so one important thing about publishing that many people don't know is they don't even know to negotiate on it. Actually, I didn't know it on my first book. I
Yeah.
realized that after my first book is
Right.
not something which is rupees or something which they even will write down in the contract.
Correct.
It is the print run. So as in so just think about it from your perspective. You have given your book away to a publisher who will take 90%,
Yeah.
92% of whatever it makes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now the publisher has made a calculation. So what the calculation have they made? Their calculation is that it's based on the print run. So let's say for me, let's take an example. So if any publisher publishes 2,000 copies of my book, they know it's 100% safe because my social media presence itself will sell 2,000 copies.
Correct.
You don't have to put even a single amount of effort. It will not, it doesn't even need to it doesn't even need to go to the bookstores. It will sell
Right.
off my Twitter. So they want to print 2,000 copies of my book because that means they're taking 90% of my money by taking zero risk. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
So your job as an author is to make sure that they don't do this. And that's the negotiation. So your thing is sometimes rather than negotiating on your like 1%, you negotiate on the print run. You say, no, you have to print like 5,000, 10,000, 20,000.
I'll take that. I'll make my slab accordingly for the 5,000.
Because once they print that many copies, then they are taking risk because there is the cost of inventory, there's the cost of distribution. Then their commercial team really starts pushing the book. And
Amazing.
that's when you're getting the value out of the 90% of the revenue that you're giving away. Otherwise, it's a lose-lose for you.
Got it. But one of the quick question: how does one arrive at that number? Like 5,000 or whatever x thousand is commensurate with where you are today, right? But isn't the number different for someone who's starting off?
So of course, as a first-time author, you might not be able to negotiate anything.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that as you mature, so as a first-time author, the publisher will say, I have zero sales from you, right? So it's not 100% true that a first-time author has no sales, because sometimes, and this is true, many Indian publishers love to publish like a big company's VP or somebody big, because they know that he will be able to sell his book in his own company. Ultimately, and this is unfortunately true in the Indian market more than other markets, it's the personality of the author that sells sometimes more than the book. So
dimple. Do you have dimples?
I don't have dimples, and I don't have an shaped face also. So as you can well see, so it is very much as I once said in a lit fest that actually when you take the book with you at night, you're going to bed with the author.
Correct.
So like literally. Unfortunately, and this is true in India in certain of the definitely in the romance books, absolutely, which is why I don't write romance, of course. So it is very much the author. Now, it's not so much true for other genres, but it is to an extent true too. So the publishing house is very concerned about the person. So if the person, for instance, they believe is, it's like they don't have a social media following, or even politically, they might feel that we don't want to promote this person.
This guy,
it doesn't matter what you write. I mean, they haven't even read. They will say, I mean, I've encountered this myself. The book is great. It's you who's the problem. So
correct.
Don't come with the book. I mean, it doesn't matter. So, but publishing, and this is also important, it's also an extremely ideologically driven business. It's not as if, and this is especially true for the big name publishers. So it is a very ideologically driven, and you can always see why would you work with the big name publishers? For me, the reason is not financial. It's more it's more like I don't write for money, honestly. But
Hmm.
I do want to work. I do want to work with international brands. So
Right.
that's why that's the same way I buy my jeans. It's the same way
You will get your
I
books published. Publishing Shakchunni? Who is your publisher?
Hachette.
Actually, again. Okay, awesome. But I think I remember you mentioning how I think Juggernaut published Mahabharata Murders last, right?
Mhm.
You had at that point of time a lot of praise for how they were making it more DIY, and a lot many more things like Kickstarters, etc., were being given to you. So, has your view changed, or were those actually at that point of time, 2016, 17, good things to have?
So with Mahabharat Murders, I had worked with Hachette for Sultan of Delhi.
Hmm.
And I had wanted, so Mahabharat Murders was my book that got the most number of bids. When
Okay.
you send it, everybody, virtually all the major publishing houses want to publish that one.
Got it.
So the reason why I went to Juggernaut was, again, even though Juggernaut was a local publisher, but I felt, and maybe I would not have done it now, but
Hmm.
I just felt that they were doing things a little bit differently, and I was a little disappointed with the ways the big names were doing
Hmm.
books at that point of
Yeah.
time. I felt that they would do, like, they were being app based, they were like doing microfiction. So I thought, okay, I
Hmm.
mean, something new.
Hmm.
The old model was kind of dying at that point of time, but I mean, it's the problem really with the problem really that's happening now, and that's why I can't think of any way of which books would sell, is
Hmm.
that with the internet becoming so cheap and with streaming becoming so cheap, um, in order to just be exposed to good stories, you don't have to read anymore.
Right.
So
True.
you can get good stories, you can watch good
Yep.
stories.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, I'm lucky that two of my books have been adapted to OTT
Hmm.
web series. it's
Yeah.
it's not a lot of authors have that in
Yeah.
India. But I mean, the only way that people get to know you is because they watch the book, and
Yeah.
then they and sometimes you worry that maybe they think that the book is what they watched,
Hmm.
but it's not. But the way I rationalize it is that if somebody was really serious about reading my book, they would read the book. They wouldn't watch
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So it in any case is an audience I wouldn't have.
We covered in depth. The second one in the series was, of course, The Mine, which is my absolute personal favorite. I was watching Kala Pani a couple of weeks back, and I was thinking if Kala Pani, something that sort of a story has been made, The Mine should be. And I really hope there is a bit for that. Brilliant, psychological thriller. Saw. Sort of a storyline, and what was your take? What went through your mind to go for something like this? And by the way, the characters, I mean, so beautifully written, right? So each of them, and that's what I think makes the story so strong. I unfortunately have lost that copy. Maybe I left it in Calcutta. But what was your take? What went through your mind in the process
So
of me
mine
writing the
was
book?
the first book that I wanted to write, actually.
Okay.
Mine, I had that idea for many years. The,
Hmm.
the reason why I didn't write it was what I said. It was not something that I was comfortable writing.
At that
I
point.
couldn't even believe, I mean, I couldn't think that I would be able to write a full book before. And writing short stories in like that kind of comedic style was something which which I was very comfortable in. So I wrote the book that I was more comfortable writing first. Mine was a difficult sell. I mean, again, when I said it's difficult sell, it was very easy to sell because
Hmm.
MIHYAP was a major hit. So whatever I wrote would be published
Follow.
at that point of
Right. Right. Right.
time. But it was difficult for two reasons. First of
Hmm.
all, in India, we don't have such a big market for books. In the US or in Europe, you
Hmm.
have like horror publishers. The editor that you get is somebody who does horror exclusively.
Hmm.
Here in India, the same guy doing romance, then doing Sudhamurthy's book, will then do mine. So it's the same person, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you, as a reader, so your editor is basically your biggest champion. If your editor does not like your book, like not
Yeah.
like as in it's an okay book, but I
Yeah.
love this book, then
Yeah.
it's very difficult to work with that person in a creative way.
Okay.
And the problem in India was that most of the people who were editing and for those of you who have read Mind is an extremely violent and graphic novel.
Very gory. Yeah. Yeah.
So it is not a novel which is an easy read. It is a very disturbing story, a very disturbing people. So it was not an easy book to like, actually. So writing the book, so I was working with Westland. So the company that I went with was Westland. Westland is a company I think kind of ceased to exist and now is back because Amazon divested Westland. So I worked with Westland for one very simple reason. Westland gave me a huge advance for the time.
Now we know the commercial. You have explained why. Yeah,
so because MIHYAP was a very big hit, so they knew that. And again, mine also was a fairly big hit also.
Right.
So that was the reason why I went with, and it was then at that point of time when I was maturing as an author, I realized that it is very important to have somebody on the editorial team on which you have, like, they like the book. I mean, like as in really like the book, and that wasn't the case. It's not an easy book to like.
Having that one side, one person who is on your side with a conviction, right? So
yes, with great conviction. So it was when the book came out. Again, the book. I want to just focus, since the focus is marketing and product. First of all, one of the things that a lot of authors like to say is, I don't care for the sales of a book.
Oh, okay, sales.
I don't, and that is some kind of ideological purity.
Yeah.
And you don't like my book, don't friggin' buy it. I'm not that kind of an author, because if I was writing a book for no one, I would just keep it as a diary. Obviously, I want the book to sell, so I have to consider things like, will this book work as a product? And I find it fascinating too. It's not just something which I am forced to do. I love the idea of a product, of what makes a successful product. So with mine, for instance, since I wrote it for an Indian market, if I had written it internationally, so the thing is, of all my books, this book came closest to be publishing to being published in the US. So what happened was that I was looking for an agent. So one thing about the commercial aspect of it, which I forgot, is the presence of an agent. Now in India nowadays there are agents, but it is much more serious in international publishing. So in international publishing, no reputed book publisher will take a direct submission from an author. They will only go with agents, because agents are a first line of vetting.
What is the agent commission that an author will have to?
Agent gets 10% to 15% commission. So an agent is, so the paradox of an agent in international publishing is the good ones don't take new authors, and the ones who take new authors are not agents that you should be signing up with. So what I had done at that point of time was, mine was in a draft form. It was not even final. I had sent it. I knew someone who was in Random House in the US. So I sent it to her saying, this is me. Could you recommend me to an agent? That was what I did. And she never wrote back, which was fine. I mean, for an author, most people don't write back. Then 7 months later, she writes back and says, I like the book so much that we considered whether we would publish it. And I sent it to 3 editors. So in order for them to publish, all 3 editors have to say yes. 2 editors said yes, 1 editor said no. And so now the tragedy was that I could have sent a much better product, and I didn't send it. If I knew that it was going to, I wouldn't have sent that. So what they said, and this is so important for markets, is that they felt that this was a very short book. The story is excellent. But if you have 6 characters, you need a book that is 3 times this length in order to establish the 3 characters and their backstory. And if you look at, let's say, Stephen King, just look at the lengths of the novels he writes. Right? So in order to write a horror novel for an international market, it needs to be like a 500, 600, 700 pager. But in India, and that's the market I was writing for, there is no way
who's going to read. If I want to
pick up a 500-page book for a guy who is an Indian author. They might read it for George R.R. Martin or Stephen King, but for
Or
me,
if it's a biography of by Walter Isaacson. Yeah.
yes, but they will not read a 600-page fiction, and they
Correct.
don't care for character development to that
Correct.
extent.
Correct.
So this is where the market you're writing for makes a huge difference. So
Amazing.
if you are writing, let's say, so there are some people who write books just to win awards. It's like what in movies is called Oscar bait.
Yeah.
So there is no chance of the movie working commercially, right? So it's not you're trying to make Avengers. So you're trying to make this movie which will have like a 1 week or 2 week run in a theater.
Yeah.
Then it will win Oscars, and then it will have a next run which will be based on the Oscar nomination. So the Oscar is the marketing.
Correct. Correct.
So so many people write books like that. So the main thing is to win a Booker. Now, if you want to write a product like that, there are certain checkpoints you have to hit.
Where are you in your path to win a Booker? Where are you?
Yes.
On a scale of
Yes.
10, where are you?
Yeah, so it's a formula. It is no different from a Govinda movie formula. It is well known what the formula is. Now, but if you want to do sales, if you want to write commercial fiction, which is what I'm interested in. I'm not interested. I don't read Booker Prize winners, and I don't write Booker Prize winners because it's just not for me. Yeah. So I write the books that I read. So for me, the sales are very important. So that's why, for instance, for Sultan of Delhi, it is actually, if I was writing for a different market, I would not have written book 1. I would have waited till book 2 and published it as a 600-page book.
Fair.
But I couldn't because there were 2 reasons why. Because now I can possibly write Sultan of Delhi 2 because of the TV series. There will be interest in reading what happens.
What happens next? Yeah.
But I didn't know it would be made into a TV series, but I knew there was zero chance that I would be able to sell a 700, 600-page book, which is what the full story is. The second book that I'm writing isn't a sequel. It is the same book. So there's no sequel to it at all. It just kind of... So unfortunately, I had to break it up into 2 parts because I couldn't sell it as a product. So the takeaway from this for people watching it is that it's the length which is important. It's the tone which is the important. And third thing is, who's the audience you're selling it to? Is there even an audience for this book?
Yeah.
So for mine, the audience, I knew what the audience was. The audience was people who liked psychological thrillers, who watch psychological thrillers, and who want a very cinematic story. So one of the criticisms, when Sultan of Delhi came out from Hotstar, Scroll, of course, reviewed it badly, but they didn't review the TV series as much as they reviewed the book and me. So they started off by saying that Arnab Ray's book, Sultan of Delhi, when it was released, screamed, "Adapt me." And now it has been adapted. That was the first line of the the review of the TV series, unfortunately. But they had some good things to say because they had even worse things to say about the TV series, unfortunately. But they said, at least the book had a sense of history, which is like, patronizing, but fine. I'll take that. Fine. But the thing was, again, that when people say it's adapt me, no, I honestly don't write for it to be adapted. Yeah. But since I am a cinematic person, more than a book person, I also feel that my books also appeal to people who are primarily more cinema people than book people. In an ideal world, if I had taken the career direction of a Srijit Mukherjee, I would have made movies. Right. But since I can't make movies, because first of all, I don't know movie making, and movie making is not something which you can do as a hobby. It's a full-time.
Correct.
And I don't stay in the country too. So that's why my books are basically surrogates for movies. Now, you can criticize them for it and say, this is not a book. It reads like a script. But it is not. It is very visual, my book. Yeah. And it moves through that kind of act structure that you would find in a movie. And this is also by design, because many people do read that because it is like a movie. Yeah. That's the main thing. That is what distinguishes me from most authors, is that when you read my books,
it's visual, and you get transported into that visual world. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's beautiful, and I just summarized it, in 2-3 ways, like you said. Like I think everything else is so fundamentally always the same out of the right. Like I mean, whichever category you stick to, knowing your target audience inside out before you start your venture, right? Whether it be writing a book or launching a soap, right? I think fundamentally that truth is still the same, right? That's the first principle. Second, like you mentioned, the tone, the bit around tone, and what you wanted to convey. I think that's beautiful as well. And third, I really like that what not to do, and knowing that, being self-aware about that even though you think visually, you write visually, you knew very well that movie making was not your forte, right? So my mind went immediately back to that ponytailed, within quotes, genius Arindam Chaudhary, who got that movie out, Rok Sako To Rok Lo. I'm pretty sure you remember that. I remember that full page ad that he got out, that book kar diya, college launch kar diya, movie bhi kar hi denge. He roped in Gadar 2's famous Sunny Deol as well, but we know where his movie making journey he himself went. So it's not everyone's cup of tea. I think knowing what not to do, that's something I think it's extremely crucial, and being clear about it. Awesome. Going back to your journey, the next one, Yatrik, right? So I remember this came out around 2014. I had just become a father, like 2 years prior. So I could clearly see that this was something probably you wrote keeping your daughter in mind, right?
Yes,
In a lot of
absolutely.
ways, right? It was so beautiful. I mean, and it was departure from your other 4 stories, I would say. But you want to talk about it, like again, the
Sure.
process?
So the reason why, so first of all, my daughter was born in 2013, at kind of the same time. So I
Yeah.
wanted to write a book for my daughter,
Hmm.
because I don't think any of the other books were, I honestly, now I'm afraid when she reads it, what she will think of me. But Yatrik is not that. It is
Right.
very much. There were two things. One was I wanted to write a book which is philosophical to an extent, but
Mhm.
also there was something which I wanted to do was, there used to be a genre of novels in Bengali written by an author called Shankar.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was
Nice. Oh,
so
okay.
Satyajit Ray made quite a number of movies based on Shankar's novels.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Correct.
so Shankar was a very cinematic, like me, very cinematic novelist. He was not a conventional novelist, like let's say a Sharat
Hmm.
Chandra or somebody, or even like a Vibhuti Bhushan.
Hmm.
So I wanted to write a Shankar kind of novel in English,
Hmm.
and I also wanted to write about a time of Bengal that has not been written very often, which is the fall of the CPM and the rise of the Trinamool. That part, right? And
Okay.
that is very much Operation Sunshine, and everything is very much a part of the book. So I
Correct.
felt that there was a part of my history, the history that I grew up with. And even
Hmm.
MIHYAP is part of history. It's secret history of the 90s.
Yeah.
So this was the more political history of the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Yeah.
That's the political backdrop of this novel. It's a political novel, by the way.
Absolutely.
Those who don't
Absolutely.
know
Yeah.
Bengal politics will not get the political part, but um, there are they're based on actually real people and real incidents.
Mhm.
And so there was one part was I wanted to write a political novel, but I also wanted to write a philosophical novel which is not chicken soup for the soul, but
Hmm.
it's a novel and it has a twist at the end. So all my
Correct.
novels have a major twist at
Twist.
the end. So
Yeah.
it is so Yatrik of all my novels worked the least. And
Mhm. Hmm.
even though it was pretty well marketed, Westland, actually I have nothing to complain about Westland. They, I mean,
Hmm.
they perhaps did more than, I mean, they did more than perhaps should have been done for the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this book didn't work.
Hmm.
uh, i I understand why it
Yeah.
didn't work, because it was kind of genreless.
Mhm.
So there was no genre that you could put it in.
Yeah.
That was one thing. And second is that, and this is something which I've noticed, and now I've seen it validated by people in the OTT space when I talk to them. Now I talk to quite a number of people who make
Correct.
OTT series and stuff. So
Correct.
because of my experiences, and they say books set in Calcutta and Bengal are flops. Anything that's set,
Oh,
because
wow.
in
Hmm.
there is very little interest in
Hmm.
Bengal.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so there people much want to watch something set in UP, Mirzapur, that kind of, there is an intense interest, but there is very little interest
Hmm.
in in anything set in Bengal. And
Wow.
one reason for that is that
Okay.
the Bengal, and this is perhaps the marketing part of it,
Huh.
that there aren't. So when I used to look at book sales,
Mm-hmm.
and it used to be broken out by region.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, by far the weakest book sales came from the East.
Okay.
So
Shit.
usually people in the East have this arrogance that we read a lot of books and we are educated and cultural capital. It's not actually true at all. The North reads much, much, much more.
Oh, this is brilliant. Just rank the regions. Basis your now
So
12-year-old
the
publishing
biggest
history.
sales
Not.
always believe it. So people will
Hmm.
say South. No, it's West.
Holy sh! Oh my God.
Maharashtra,
Okay.
major book sales. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. English, huh?
Then
Oh.
South,
Hmm.
then North, and then marginal teeny tiny East. And I'm an author from the East. Okay.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that is also the reason I feel that there is very little interest in the
Huh.
East. It's that every region is interested in themselves, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
and so the market in the East, because of political reasons, is just so weak. Basically, we don't have money. We don't have enough money.
Hmm.
If you look at the
Hmm.
budget for a Bengali movie, you
Oh
look
yeah.
at the budget for a Telugu movie, right? You
Yeah.
realize that
Hmm.
there's no comparison, right? And
Correct.
Hindi movie, I'm just leaving aside Hindi. See, Hindi, you can say there is pan-India interest.
VFX and all. Yeah.
Regional cinema, like
Hmm.
there's no comparison. Like Bengali
Hmm.
cinema budget is only above Odia cinema budget. That's it, nothing else. And they're both East, by the way. So
Yeah.
that is the reason why. And Yatrik was very much a Calcutta novel. That is one
Hmm.
reason I believe that it didn't sell.
Hmm.
It could have sold if there was a big market in Bengal where people will get the cultural context, but there wasn't a lot at all.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. And okay, moving on to Sultan of Delhi, and the key question that I have, I think it's definitely the biggest moment of your life to pose with Moni Roy, right? So what would you say, Ray and Roy
No,
posing together?
actually, the biggest moment of my life was not to pose with Moni Roy, but to shake hands with Anu Malik. Because
Then talk us through that. Yeah.
because I mean, when Anu Malik is in front of you, I mean that's like major 90.
आग लगा देगा. Yeah. This is
Yes,
it.
yes. And so I just couldn't. I was just hoping that Anu Malik has no idea as what I've written about him. Then Anu Malik's daughter had sung the songs, and she writes books. And when she said, I was more scared that she had read what I had written. I mean, the entire experience was amazing. It was just walking and you're seeing the red carpet walk. You're talking to Milan Luthria. I mean, I watched the movie sitting with Milan Luthria, sharing popcorn with Milan Luthria, like next to him, and he was like saying, "How was this thing?" It was great. I mean, one thing I would say that I'm not a Bollywood person. I've never been there. They never knew, but they made me feel so welcome. I've not been made to feel so welcome in any lit fest that I've ever been to. That I was made to feel there. They were very, very nice.
So one question, Arnab, I'm dying to ask. I don't know how much you can divulge on this. That adaptation and based on, right? So when that happens, I mean, I have read the book and I've seen the series. They have put in characters which weren't there in your book, right? So how much input do you or an author like you gets to have, or is it like once you sell the rights, that's it? It's up to the creator and the director, and they do what they want.
So once you sell the rights, it is. I actually had never saw the script, didn't know anything.
Wow.
The only time I saw it first time.
Sorry to pause you. Is it like with everyone? Like even if with the biggest talk, much bigger authors than
Mahabharata
you?
Murders. Mahabharata Murders, same thing.
Same. Wow. Oh, okay.
So unless you write yourself in the contract,
that you need to, everything needs to be vetted by you, etc.
Yes, and that is something which perhaps the bigger authors would do. Is that they would write themselves into the contract. But if it is not in the contract, they 100% do not want the author for a very good reason. Because they will rip apart whatever the author has done. And so the author is just somebody who is going to not like it. Might even talk on social media about it before it comes out. Or just create trouble with the creative team.
Which is not what they want in the process, the production process.
Not what they want. So they intentionally do not involve the author at
Got it.
all. I've seen this with both with Mahabharata Murders and with Sultan of Delhi. It was because Sultan of Delhi was with a much more corporatized structure, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
Hotstar, and they are kind of bound by Disney. They have an absolute embargo. I couldn't even talk about the
talk
fact
about. Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
Sultan of Delhi was being made, even though they were
I can
gossip
understand.
everywhere.
Donald, I've engaged with Disney professionally for one collab, so I know what you're saying. Like the legalities are insane. And
Yes,
it's a global legalities for
it's a
Disney. Nothing to
global
do with us.
legality. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, they have the rights to
yeah,
Marvel and Star Wars, so their
correct,
laws are the same for both of them. Of course,
correct,
so
correct.
that's why you're under that.
Hmm.
So, so that's the thing. I was not involved at all.
Got it, got it. Now, moving on to your last published book. I mean, it's been a while, and we'll obviously talk about Shakchunni, Mahabharata Murders. I think, personally, I don't know. I want you to react. I think the adaptation was a murder of the book. In a lot
What
of.
makes a web series viable, again, it is also a commercial product, is that it
Hmm.
has to be watched by a sufficient number of people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if my book had that appeal to that number of people, they would have seen it already. They would have read it already. They haven't, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people read the books. I mean, if you make a web series for the number of people who read a book, that
Book
is dead
that is never
in
going
the
to. Yeah,
water as the
that's a terrible web series. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So anything, whether it be Sultan of Delhi or Mahabharat Murders, has to be made to a mass audience. I am not the audience for either of the TV series. And this is
Correct,
something which authors often don't understand because it is
correct.
their baby. They
Yeah.
feel that the final product is for them. Now, no, the book was your final product and that was for you. Ultimately, if
Yeah.
you don't write the book, why did you write it, right?
Hmm,
So,
hmm,
this is not your book. What
hmm,
you
hmm,
see as the adaptation isn't your
hmm.
book. It
Right.
is a commercial product for a different market
Hmm,
based on certain aspects of your book, which has
hmm,
been changed. And
hmm.
honestly, if your book was that great, these people would have read it already, right? They didn't.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
is for, so you have to put your ego to the side. Yes,
Hmm,
some
hmm,
people might, in general, people who read Mahabharat Murders might not
hmm,
like the
hmm,
adaptation.
hmm,
Same thing with Sultan of Delhi, because the adaptation. So if you look at Mahabharat Murders, the
hmm,
adaptation, they
hmm,
chopped off, they totally
hmm.
chopped off about 40% of the book, which
Yeah,
was about the main character Ruxana and
correct.
what she's going through. So they chopped that portion off, and they've chopped a portion off which was about the nature of dharma, which is the
Hmm,
last page, which he
hmm.
realizes what really the core of dharma is at the end.
Right.
See, this was too deep for the
Hmm,
audience, right?
hmm, hmm,
Now, if you take that out, now when a certain section sees it, they
hmm.
are trying to think this is a Netflix premium
Secret
product.
Games. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
want, yes, so Sacred Games. I did personally didn't like Sacred Games either, but let's say there is, let's say Breaking Bad. Let's compare
Hmm,
something with something which is, so
hmm,
if you
hmm,
are going to compare, so I'll give you an example of how it works. So in
hmm,
Breaking Bad,
hmm.
there is a not in Breaking, in Better Call Saul, sorry, which I
Better
actually
Call
like
Saul.
even more than Breaking Bad.
Hmm, yeah.
There is a place in which one of the characters spends about 7 minutes, I think, of screen
Hmm,
time. Maybe
hmm.
not 7 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, but it's a hugely long sequence of nothing. He's
Huh.
trying to take a shoe and he's
Hmm,
throwing it again and again so that the
hmm.
string goes on top of a wire and
Ah,
the shoe sits there. So it spends about, it's an inordinate long amount of time, right? Now, why is the inordinate long amount of time needed? The
hmm.
reason why it's needed is that it establishes a very important factor about the person. It
Right.
is that effort, the fact that you yourself as the audience are finding it boring,
Yeah.
is like, how boring is it for this guy? Now you feel that you have the emotional connect. Now
Lovely.
this is when you're making a sophisticated thing, you think.
Correct.
It's not that these
Correct.
guys couldn't edit it out. They did
Yeah.
it for a reason.
No, so
when
fair. Yeah. Sorry.
when
Sorry. Please go
Mahabharata
on.
Murders came out, a
Hmm,
persistent criticism was it's
hmm.
too slow from the audience.
Yeah.
So of course, I mean, they kind of went really fast. I mean, that was the main problem. It was going too fast. I mean, there was no character development. But even
Yeah.
that for the audience was
Hmm.
too slow,
It's
because
too slow.
they have to think about audience retention. This is there are two metrics which any OTT platform tracks.
Hmm.
One is how many new subscribers signed on to your OTT platform
Penetration.
around the 2 weeks of its release, new customer
Correct.
acquisition. And the
Correct.
second is how many people who
Retention.
started it finished it. Those are
Yeah.
the only two things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they are obsessing about somebody doesn't stop.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
so yes, when you see something, especially when it's your own baby and you're kind of emotionally invested in it, you think, well, this is not. But then you realize that it has not been made for me. It has been
Yeah.
made for somebody else.
Yeah.
And any similarity with my original is just coincidental at this point of time.
Got it. It's beautiful. I mean, I love that example that you mentioned of the languid, filmmaking at times, which is needed to tell the backstory and to let the viewer understand the motivation. And immediately the other contrast that came back to my mind, I think Tarantino talks about it, about Inglourious Bastards. I'm forgetting the name of the character who had like a mark on his throat, right? And there is no reason for that mark to be there. But he mentioned that there's a reason why he put that's almost leaves it in the mind of the viewer that there is a backstory for that mark to be there, right? Like, why was his throat cut, right? So that, although he never shows and he never shot anything, right? But
So
those are the two extremes.
So
Yeah.
past Hindi movies
Hmm.
got this. So I'll give you an example of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Shakti Kapoor used to have this in many of his things. I went from Tarantino to Shakti Kapoor,
Love
but
it. Yeah.
he used to have this like catch line which he would say,
Hmm.
like "Summadi mein kummadi kabdi khele kabdi" or something, or "Pappu chalaya chappu." So why did they do that? Because he has like two scenes. He can't establish his character, so he has
Correct.
to do something that the audience walks away with, which they can remember, like a meme, right? So,
Yeah.
so they understood this. Modern Hindi movies don't have this anymore. They don't
Correct.
have these distinguishing things, which is why people go back to the Amrish Puris and the Shakti Kapoors, because they understood this in a
Yeah.
very visceral way, that people don't like stories. They like characters. They may say, I liked the story or didn't like the story, but the
Yeah.
story is not important. It is the characters. This is why Disney licenses characters. They don't buy stories.
Correct.
When
Absolutely.
I sold Sultan of Delhi, they didn't buy the story. They bought the characters. That's what they have the rights on, not the story, the characters.
This is
Because
beautiful.
that's what they understand is the real IP.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you an example. I mean, I was working with Hindustan Unilever at one point, right? So Unilever had this content day internally where the biggest of names, including Disney, came in and pitched, like, with their portfolio of brands, what can be the ideas. Disney's pitch was, and this didn't happen, by the way, because it was too controversial. One of the ideas that they showed Mickey Mouse, and this is 2016 I'm talking about, and Modi. They wanted to talk about the Swachh Bharat mission being driven by a couple of home care brands of Unilever with Mickey Mouse and Modi together. This never happened, but that's what Disney did. Again, like, licensing their character with probably the biggest selling mascot in India today, which is Modi, which is amazing. And again, like, it's not a story. Disney could have told different stories and cross-tabbed that with brands, but they license characters. Amazing. And by the way, just one more thought from the Shakti Kapoor anecdote. I think we should do one more episode with your permission and your time on probably critiquing some of the pop culture ads. There's a beautiful new ad from Agio. If you have seen, with Shakti Kapoor and Shraddha Kapoor, you should see this, by the way. Wherein it starts with Shraddha Kapoor coming in and saying, "Itna acha sale." And this is so kick-ass. And they say that Shraddha Kapoor ka baap bhi aa jayega. And then actually Shakti Kapoor comes in. It's an amazing ad. Anyway, much like the new tradition in Hindi cinema, you have been having drops of Shakchunni or some anecdotes over the last few months, and I've been following that religiously. Can't wait to buy it. But one question, I think one of my favorite verbs in marketing and content and culture is cross-tabbing, right? I think you cross-tab 2-3 things in Shakchunni from your own past tweets. I've seen that one is Bengali folklore and myths, right? And also, I think history, Bengali famine, and all of that coming together with obviously a story, right? So how is all of that getting cross-tabbed in Shakchunni? And tell us about Shakchunni. What is it all about?
So, so the genesis of Shakchunni is that my daughter was very young, and in order to make her understand Bengali, since we are in the US, used to show her YouTube videos of Thakurmar Jhuli.
Right.
So there are these animations of Thakurmar Jhuli. And so there was this story about the Shakchunni. So, see, I had read it when I was very young. So I was not an author, right? Nowadays, I look for subtext and sub-narratives. So when I saw the Shakchunni story, I felt, whoa, hold on. There is an amazing story. There's an amazing subtext to this. So the story is in there is that the Gini, the lady goes to the forest, and there's a Shakchunni who possesses her and comes back. And the Shakchunni is actually they're basically showing the Shakchunni is superhuman in the kitchen. Her neck goes like this, and she gets something. Her hand stretches out, and then the Shashuri, the mother-in-law, says, "I think something's wrong with." So what's wrong with? So the fact is, the person's become better at their work. That's the thing. And that's when people immediately realize there's something wrong with the person. So there are two things about this. So the thing is that the Shakchunni wants the life of somebody else, which is such a persistent thing in our culture today, right? This is what drives the Instagram culture and everything. We want that, whether it is FOMO, but it is the life of somebody else. So the main theme is the life of somebody else who you want to be. And that is the core of the Shakchunni. The real fear of Shakchunni is an existential thing, that my life is not good. I wish I was someone else. So the notion of possession isn't so much, somebody becomes like the head starts turning around. No, it is the possession is that I don't want to be myself. I want to be someone else. So that's the driving thing about Shakchunni. Yes, it is set in the dying days of the Bengali zamindar, of the Bengali zamindars. It's set during the Great Bengal Famine, and it's about a zamindari family which had fallen on hard days. But then once the famine starts, they start basically smuggling rice. So they take their own rice, they hide it, and wait for the price to go up as people die starving. And then they sell it at the price of gold. This is, again, true story.
Right.
So it's based on a family which does that. And so one of their eldest son comes back from England, not being able to complete his studies. He fell in love with a British woman. The British woman left him, and he comes home like catatonic with grief. He's a failed poet, and then his parents basically marry him off to whoever and say, you know what? Once he had kids, you'll be fine. So that's when he marries a woman from a distant village who nobody knows, and then then strange things start happening. So again, the reason why I wrote it was I wanted to write a historic novel, even though I know that as a product Bengal doesn't work. Yes, I know this now.
One more try.
It is, at least unlike Yatrik, it is a deep psychological horror.
Correct.
It has a twist, of course. It's deep psychological horror. It's atmospheric. It's gruesome too. So it's not, again, it's very conventional. I deliberately, and I'm not getting into it much deeper, but I deliberately use all the tropes of the story. So if you're reading it, so one person who was a test reader, who was a Bengali, who was reading it, he said, so he was reading it, he was saying, I like all your books, but I'm not quite liking it. It's just like every other, I've grown up reading this. And then he said that the end totally blew me away. I'm just worried that most people will not read to the end, because the end basically turns it, blasts out all the tropes. So, but it has to be, so that the main thing is with a successful product is that it needs to end well. All of my books, I write the ending before I start writing it, because for me it's very important for the consumer of my product to walk away with a good experience. For me, the biggest failure is when, for instance, in movies, they say till the first half it was very good, then it became bad. See, that is a bad product. It should be the other way around, because if the first half is bad, then people's expectations may go down, and then a great second half will like blow their mind. This is a very bad product is one which starts off great, increases your expectations, and then brings it down. So when you come out, you will then speak badly of it. See, so that is what I'm trying to avoid in this book.
So I think I like your biggest challenge from this book, that will people come to the end, right? So that's
the end. And that's there's another thing that I would like to say is, again, because and this is kind of counter programming to the whole marketing thing and brings back to the hubris of the author. So to an extent, I do write for the market, but to an extent I don't do, because there are certain things that I will not compromise.
You want to, because you want to do.
Because ultimately, because see, that the thing is, when something gets made into a TV series, I have no control over it. But this is me, and I know my audience. It ultimately has to be a book that I like reading myself. That is the biggest test. So there was no other way I could have done this. And all that I would request people is to just persist with the book. Just persist with the book. It's not what you think.
When is it coming out on the stands?
It's coming out in February of 2024.
February. Okay. So wow, it's a 7-year itch. 2017 is when Mahabharata.
Yes. So I wrote a book in the middle. It was a cybersecurity book. This was an international publisher. So this was an international publisher. That book took me 5 years to write, by the way. That was the book that took me the most. I mean, when you write nonfiction, it's not like writing fiction. You can't just write anything. Correct. Everything has to be cited. The research stuff keeps changing. So you write again and again. So I wrote that book, very different, nothing to do with this. There were two reasons why I wrote it. I was extremely disappointed with the Indian publishing scene. I wanted to do nothing with it at that point. The second reason was that I'd always had this like geek dream of writing a textbook, because the immortality of Bhalo Chele in Bengal is that textbook. K.C. Nag and K.P. Basu is the sort of Ganguly of the like Bhalo Chele. So
that box is ticked now. That box is ticked.
So writing a maths book or an essay book in Bengal. So like, for those of you who don't know, there used to be this algebra book by K.P. Basu. I don't even know what KP stands for. But there is K.P. Basu, K.C.
H.C. Verma in physics, for example. Even
but then people at least know that he exists as a human being. But I don't even know if
K.P. Basu people know.
Because I heard that K.P. Basu was dead many years ago. He was just somebody was writing as K.P. Basu for many years. So he died in
like Kotler's books. Yeah, like Kotler's marketing book.
There was editions being published, but there was K.P. Basu was. So I want to be like that. I want my book to be published after I'm dead under my name. So because that's when you're a brand. So yeah, that's why I wrote that book. That book actually, honestly speaking, that book is done better because it is sold in dollars. So that's one thing.
It was absolute numbers. It has done better.
But because it is a textbook written for industry, it sells a lot. Because people buy that, and it's much cheaper than getting a consultant. So that's the reason why it sells a lot, and it makes money because it's in dollars, and also because in academic publishing the percentage you get is much higher. That's also true.
I like the thinking. I think a couple of anecdotes on that as reflections on the non-fiction book that you have written, the only one so far. I think I remember going through the first preface, and I haven't obviously read it because it's not a subject matter of interest for me. But I felt it's a similar experience that one would probably have when I went through Great Derangement, the first non-fiction book of Amitav Ghosh, right? And I realized that he has excellent subject matter expertise on all things environmental, and then I realized he has actually covered that in Hungry Tide everywhere. So I think who you are as a person, I think in non-fiction your depth gets questioned so much more, and hence you have brought that along. So
I'll mention one thing about marketing again. So my non-fiction book begins with the following introduction. Who reads a book nowadays, and why would I write a book when nobody reads it? So the reason why I wrote the book was I said that anything that you can find online, I point to it. I don't rewrite it because I can't compete with online.
Why reproduce it?
Yes, this is not a book which is a replacement to online reading. And as a matter of fact, if something is written better online, I just point you to it and say, don't read it here. The only thing that's here is stuff that you will not, at the point of writing, find online. So everything that you buy is something that you cannot get for free. If something you get for free, I don't write it. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's the buying, that because sometimes I wonder, why would anybody buy a book in this day and age,
correct.
especially on technical topics, because there
Yeah,
is such a depth and such great material available online. So that's why I start off the book with that pitch,
why
that
would
you are not going to find this anywhere else. That's why you should buy
correct.
this.
I did read the preface, so you do start off with that. Agreed. I actually like the problem statement that you mentioned while talking about cybersecurity for connected medical devices. That it's cheaper than getting a full-on consultant. So that's, I think, amazing. You create a use case for non-fiction. I think in fiction, one cannot do that, right? So like, I mean,
Right.
then you are telling a story. This is good.
And so another thing
Yeah,
that I say is that
yeah.
the main thing, reason why you should read this book is that, so I
Hmm,
start off by saying that,
hmm,
you know, ultimately in the medical device world that
hmm,
we work in, healthcare, we are here
hmm,
to help patients,
hmm,
right?
hmm,
So cybersecurity is something that I fully understand is not what we come to work
hmm.
to do.
Yeah,
So the main focus of what I'm going to write is a practical, minimum effort way of doing things. You can do much better. I'm not saying this is the best.
hmm,
I'm just saying this works because
hmm,
this is a feasible way
hmm.
of putting your product out such that it makes its way through, because it has to be blessed by regulators. So
Correct.
this is not like this is the ultimate thing in cybersecurity. No, this
Got
is
it.
just stuff that I have found from my experience. That's why you hire a consultant.
Yeah.
Works. This is not theory. If you want to
Yeah.
read theory, read it online, man. I can't compete with that. This
Yeah.
is based on my experience of what works. That
Correct.
is something which you won't find because I am not online. That is
Correct.
the, and every page when I was writing it, I focused on that and that only. Otherwise, it's a waste of a page.
Amazing. And also the practitioner's approach. I think that's what you are explaining as well. That I think in terms of learning and gaining new knowledge is always the best approach. So amazing. Great shout out to your one and only non-fiction book so far. All of that, I think it was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, and wish Shakchunni the very best.
Thank you
I
so much.
hope Shakchunni possesses a lot of readers in the next few since its release in February. Wish it the best. Wish you the best. May you tell more stories, and may more and more of them get adapted and into things that are more visual in other formats, OTT and beyond as well. So all the
Thank you
best
so
to you.
much. Like, share, and subscribe to East India Marketing Company.